Wow, it's going to take me a second to get used to. I'm ready though. Okay, Svensson, what do we got? For everyone listening, I do social media and Instagram.
This is just a reminder, don't forget to live today. The problem is, I don't even know what I want.
I think your 20s should be like the riskiest 10 years of your life.
Beginning of this year, you have no followers on Instagram, or
No,
just
zero.
Zero.
January, 0.
No way. So now let's merge it into the poetry.
I really enjoy the art of storytelling and how you can take storytelling and make it so artistic through poetry, right? Because poems are just little stories that kind of rhyme and feel good, And I just love that.
I think constraints are what limits a lot of people too.
Okay, tell me about it. We've created a society where it is so easy not to be bored. So I don't know, I remember I explained to you kind of my creative process is you either find a really good line and from there you work back and you find a story, or you either find a really good story and from there you work back and find a really good line. I think a lot of my poetry has those two things, a very memorable line matched with a very memorable story. I think that's very important. Wow, it's going to take me a second to get used to. I'm ready though. Okay, Svensson, what do we got?
Not much, man. I just wanted to talk about you. We had a great conversation. I was actually talking to your dad last night too. We were talking about real estate and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he said you are thinking of moving to States at some point.
Yeah. So 100%. Okay, so. For everyone listening, I do social media and Instagram. I'm in the very early stages of that, but very quickly I was able to obtain a decent sized audience, which put me in a certain group of other people with similar sized audiences. So I have a couple friends, one of them named Reed Olson, and he's really popping off now. I think he just is about to hit 600,000 on Instagram, and he's living in Arizona now, and we talk quite frequently. And he was like, hey man, I'm looking for a city to move to, and I hear really good things about Austin. I'm getting together with another buddy and we're going to check it out in January. So the first week or 2 weeks we haven't decided. It's funny, right after this I'm going to jump on a call with him and plan and book the Airbnb and get everything set. And to kind of scout out Austin and see if Austin is a feasible city for me to end up in. There's a lot of things happening in Austin in the tech industry, in the real estate industry, and especially in the creative arts. Everyone is moving to
stand-up comedy. It's
100%. Joe Rogan's there, Shane Gillis. It's
Kill Tony, I think.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. There's a big scene in Austin. So
would you ever do stand-up comedy? I'm just curious.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I don't think I'd be very good at it, okay, but maybe as a joke. Maybe the whole joke is that I would do stand-up. Yeah.
All right, interesting. So, but that's exciting, right? Potentially you might be looking at a new life if that happens.
100%. And as scary as that is, there's a lot of excitement in it because I'm young enough. I can try out Austin and fail, and still I have more than enough recovery time down the road, right? So I think it's very important for young people. It's so easy to get in this place of safety, just stay where you're at. But I think your 20s should be the riskiest 10 years of your life, where you're out, okay, I'm going to try this city, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You never know what shots are going to hit and how much that's going to affect your life in your 30s and your 40s, right? There's no reason a 20-year-old should just 100% be set on a stable job, unless that's what they want. There are some people who, I have friends who they want to be a doctor and they're just bound to determine, and 100% good on them. But most of my friends are yeah, I work this job because it's safe and I need to do something, right? Yeah, I work, I don't love my job, but what else am I going to do? And I think there's such a more hopeful side of hey, go try what you want, and if you fail, that job's still going to be there in 10 years.
You shouldn't be that scared.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit. I know we talked briefly about a lot of different topics when we were sitting down, and we had a wonderful conversation at the breakfast place. But then there's a few things I'm very fascinated about you. One is your upbringing, and the biggest difference that I versus you have is you were homeschooled.
Correct.
Versus I went to a traditional school, right? So how was that? What's your earliest memory, so to speak?
Okay. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head my earliest memory, but the contrast between, it's so important that you mentioned that, the contrast between, growing up in school versus growing up outside of school. And I'm not saying one is better or worse. I think some suit certain people better than others, if that makes sense. And I'm really grateful that my upbringing was kind of outside of that structured system. Now, keep in mind, I still did a year in high school, so I still got to, really compare the two. And while I loved both pros and cons, I think the idea of keeping me out of that, structure of 12 years, like, so if you think about it, you're in school for like 12 years. And that's first of all crazy to me. So I'm really glad I was able to like be raised outside of that, that structure. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Now, so as you're being raised in home, right? Your mom's taking care of you. She's the one she's kind of like your
Yes,
teacher,
correct.
right? And your dad goes to work, and then you have like siblings. Now, at which point did you start noticing, or do you remember a point where you started feeling like, okay, I have a bit more drive than an average person? Because I feel like you do,
I think it was when I went into grade 9 and I went to high school and I saw what my peers were. At that time, when you grow up outside of that system, you assume everyone is like you because you don't know, right? You haven't met them, you haven't been in that environment. And I think when I went there, I noticed it's not so much the difference in drive, but the difference in what they thought to be possible with their lives and what I was taught was possible with mine. And so I feel like, and this isn't across the board for everyone, but I feel like the homeschooling, staying out of that routine and monotony, even when you're young, really gave me this. My parents did a good job of like fostering this culture of like, there's more out there than just university. There's more out there than just, a 9 to 5. And so I feel like I could see a larger goal, and that fueled a certain drive to get to there. So everyone I was with, their goal was just to get into university. So obviously there's less involved in accomplishing that. Whereas my goal is like, I want to be great. I want to build things. I want to, do things bigger than me. And so naturally that drive kind of kicked in. So it was less a difference in drive that I noticed and more a difference in like long-term goal and vision that kind of, as a result, created a smaller drive in my peers. And again, that's not like across the board. Like I'm not trying to like totally like, crap on the school industry. Like I'm not, but for me, that's kind of what I noticed, especially in the school I was in.
So if you were to like visualize everything you said, it's almost like if you were to put a glass ceiling on top of your head, you didn't have a ceiling such that, or your vision or like your dream was not capped on a certain limit,
Yeah,
or your capacity
100%,
was not,
100%.
or it was not one direction or the other.
Yeah, because I was never told that the ultimate goal in life is to make it to university and get a job. Like I feel like for so many people, like school is just like the next step. Like post-secondary school is just the next step after high school, and that was never a narrative for me. I'm not saying that's a bad step, but it's treated like as the only step. I find today, and there's not a lot outside of that except for the trades, which I was very much uninterested in. And so that I think was a huge advantage of mine.
Interesting. So time and time again, like so, with decades or centuries, people kind of created this formula where a lot of people go through and they turn out okay. Mm-hmm. They don't turn out great. They don't turn out worse. They just turn out okay, right? And that's the formula where you go to school, then you go to university, and then you get a job, and then you get a family, and then you're just happily ever after, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you were not in a mold like that, and the biggest factor, it was your parenting. It was your parents.
I would say so.
Have you ever asked them, like, why did you decide to come out of the mold? Why did you decide to? Did they have an upbringing similar to yours, or like, what's the story?
No. Okay. So it's very interesting because my parents both had very different upbringing. So my mom went to like a private high school, went to university, very, very intelligent, has her master's. And my dad also has his master's, but definitely had a more of a rougher childhood. And so they both grew up in the school system. But what happened was, it was, I think, my mother's brother, he decided to homeschool his kids. And when she would go and visit him, through their homeschooling process, she noticed like a very tangible difference in the way that his kids acted and respected others, etc. And she's like, okay, well, let's try this and see what happens. She was never also a big fan of like the idea of, you're 5 years old and you should spend 6 hours a day in a classroom. She was always flowed more towards like, hey, like you're 5 years old, go out, play, explore things, develop your skills outside of, adults telling you what to do. And so I think that was kind of what swayed her to try out the homeschooling.
That's crazy. Did you ever ask her, like, why, or it's ballsy?
Yeah, no, it is, and it's super scary. Like as a parent, it's super scary because it's a big risk.
bet.
You don't know you don't know what's on the other side of that until you've tried it, And it's
Yeah.
especially because like so imagine you're a parent and all your peers are like sending their kids to school,
And her parents sent her to private school
yes,
too. So
100%. And so now everyone's looking at you like you're crazy. And what do you do? Like, I'm very grateful to them that they did end up going with that. I'm very fortunate. Also, my mom, like I said, a very smart lady. So, she was able to teach us, obviously, we were still learning, like we were still in school. It was just at home and it was structured a little differently. And I'm very grateful for that.
So she went to school, she went to private school, she gets to university, she gets a master's, and then she decides I'm going to be a housewife, I'm going to raise kids.
Yeah, I don't know if it was that like conscious like that.
Yeah.
I think it was more that's kind of what happened. So she met my dad, they got married, they had a kid, someone has to raise the kid. And so I think it kind of more defaulted to that. I don't think that was her. She had a very successful career like outside of that beforehand. So that I don't think that was like, written on paper, this is what we're going to do. I think that's kind of what happened. And I think that's kind of what she wanted. And so, yeah, that was kind of the story behind that.
Got it. And then your dad was like, he accepted that, and then you guys were like, I mean, it was not written in paper, but at some point they have to sit back and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yes,
right?
yeah. And I'm sure that happened at some point. I've never asked them specifically like how the origins of our family structure happened, but I assume it was something along those lines.
So you were a kid at this point, like, you're like, I don't know, first grade, second grade, you're going through the routine. At what point did you notice, hold on a second, and we're doing something else here, This is not
Dude,
normal.
it's so nuts you say that because it's such like it's like two different worlds, man. Like school kids have such a stereotype of what homeschoolers are like, and homeschoolers have such a stereotype of what school kids are like.
So what's your stereotype?
It's like, dude, I'll get there.
Right, okay.
It's like such like differences. So when you grow up in homeschool, it's like you're looking out a window to like a whole nother world. Like they're almost aliens. So like when I was like in second grade, like, dude, so to touch on what you said, like what I thought of school kids, like it was just what I saw like in the movies and what I heard from like my friends, like, the typical, and a lot of like the typical, everyone in school does drugs and stuff. Like, no, it was nuts. Like, especially early on, definitely a lot of bias here and there, but yeah, it was interesting. I would say very much like the stereotypical like school kid to me was like very much what you'd see in like the movies or such.
So when you say your friends, were they going to school or?
Yes, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, not all of them. So we had a very like good homeschool community of like other families.
In London?
Yeah. There's 100%. It's a whole culture, and it's so nuts because no one knows about it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different organizations that will have like co-ops or different homeschooling events. There's a pretty good community and a very, very tight community. Like some of my tightest friends.
How big is it?
Well, there's multiple ones. It's not like
Right.
just one, but couple hundred.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Are they typically conservative people? Generally?
Yeah, generally.
Generally, yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Not all of them, but
Yeah.
generally.
So at what age? So you started noticing the difference around like mid, when you were fifth grade. Like, do you remember like when, or when you like fully understood? Okay, there's a huge difference between this, and you understood the size of it. How big of a difference it's going to be, or not really.
Not really. You
Yeah.
just, I don't know. It's just when you're growing up, you don't think about those things,
Right.
You're so focused in what you're doing and what you want. You don't really, kids are kind of selfish in that way. Like they
Right.
don't really see out past that. So like I would hang out with my friends when they were done school and
Oh
when
yeah,
I was
that's
done
true.
school and
So you have like a tunnel vision. You're not like
Yeah,
really
yeah.
sitting back
Yeah,
and
I'm not-
introspectively looking at
It was,
yourself.
like it's not that deep to me. Like when I'm 8 years
Yeah,
old, I
true.
just want to play with my trucks in the sandbox.
So you get to ninth grade, and then that's when you're going to an actual
Yeah.
school. Why'd you go to an actual school at that point?
So there was a specific program. So I was very big into aviation when I was younger. I say younger, but like grade 9.
Right.
And so there was a special program at one of the schools, Montcalm Secondary School, and it was an aviation program. And how it
in
worked
high
was-
school?
Yeah, it was very cool. So we would do 1 day a week out at the Jet Aircraft Museum working on planes, and then the other 4 days were in class learning different things about planes. Like it was a very cool program, and so that's
very interesting.
Yeah, no, it was amazing, and that's what led me to the school system in grade 9, and it was a great experience. It was a great opportunity.
Did you go back to homeschooling in grade 10, or you just to the?
Yes, yeah. But that one was that was because, so at the time, like our family, we had to move to the States for different reasons. And so there was no real opportunity to actually even go to a like brick and mortar high school. So it was more, that was like kind of the decision behind that. I didn't really have a choice to go to grade 10 because our family was kind of moving around a bit.
And you are a dual citizen, right? You
Correct.
have
Yeah, I was
US
born in
passport.
Nashville,
Nice.
but I have Canadian citizenship through my mom.
That's the best way to be.
No,
Like, to
100%.
be part of
The
two
golden,
great
yeah,
countries.
2 golden passports.
Two golden passports, indeed. So, and then like great. So what? So right now, like what? So what happened with the aviation? Like, did you fell out of it? Like
No,
you-
I still love aviation. I'm still a huge fan of airplanes. I could speak on that for hours. But I think career-wise, if you go into aviation, you're kind of an employee for the rest of your life. And that's not something that's super appealing. It also takes a lot of dedication, like to get your flight hours to become a professional pilot. So it's something that you really got to be in love with, or else it's just like a, you know, not like. And I didn't have that level of, like if I wanted to fly for Air Canada, I would have to spend $65,000 to get my commercial license. I'd had to go up north to a small aviation company and work there for years getting my flight hours. Then I'd had to go to a small airline. Then I had to go medium, and then finally maybe I could get Air Canada. Like it's a long process, and if you're not in love with every step of the process, it's not appealing.
Yeah. So this whole homeschooling idea, like the way you kind of analyzed that, and then you kind of like looked at that whole journey and said, okay, this is what's going to happen at like this stage. This is what's going to happen at this stage. Okay, this is going to be my journey. And then in short, you were kind of like analyzing the journey and asking yourself if you're going to enjoy the journey. So with aviation, right? And then the answer was no.
Yeah.
And that's when you were like, okay,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
going to sign up for this journey, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Did you get that skill? Because I feel like that's a skill. A lot of people jump into things like, let me jump into it and figure it out. And then everyone who jumps into certain things, they come out of it with learnings for sure. They're going to learn for good or bad. But sometimes what happens is like they might enjoy the step 1, step 2, step 3 of the journey, and then step 4 you realize, I don't know.
The ability to analyze an opportunity and weigh out the reward, like, and how much time it would take to get you there is definitely a life skill. That is predominant, in and outside of the school system. But yes, I would say that growing up in a homeschool environment definitely helped towards that.
Got it. And then now you're coming out of, so you're back in Canada, you're done with your grade 12. And then you have typically people go to university or school.
Correct.
And then how was that process like? What did you, I mean, going into grade 11, grade 12, did you know like how you were going to come out of this, or like was that like an immediate decision right after grade 12? Like what happened there? Like the decision that you're not going to college or school?
Even from grade, like early on in grade 9, I don't know, I've never been a big fan of post-secondary. Like I'm not knocking on it, but like I've never, just like the idea of spending 4 years of your young life and all this money, unless you know what you really want to do, like the payoff was just never there for me. And again, I'm not like saying anything negative about post-secondary. There's some degrees that, you definitely need post-secondary, but I've always kind of been business oriented and arts oriented. And why would I spend, 4 years of my young life going and learning art when I could just make art? Or 4 years of my young life learning business when I could just start a business? I don't know. It never really, the payoff never really was there for me. And I saw so many like people in my life who were older than me who were coming out of university and like, I still don't know what I want to do with my life. Like I have so many friends who like have these degrees, but they just, they get the degree, but then they find out they don't actually enjoy the work that the degree brings. And I think a lot of it, I was just scared of that being an outcome. And so that kind of made post-secondary never appealing to me. So I'm like, okay, I'll take a few years and just kind of see where I fall in a few years, right? And so that's where I am kind of now, if that makes sense.
Got it. So right after grade 12, so you're like in an opposite. So now let's merge it into the poetry.
Okay.
Where do you realize that you have a skill for, or, you have a thing for it? Like, did you write when you were young? Like where?
Okay, yeah, 100%. Okay, so
I know you told me a story.
Yes,
like when we were at
100%, yes,
right?
but I can go over it again.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of been writing. I've always loved the idea of, first of all, art in general. Like it's just so amazing. Like the fact that you can just create art is amazing. So I've always been writing. I think I kind of seriously started writing when I was about 15. Just like short stories or poetry. I really enjoy the art of storytelling and how you can take storytelling and like make it so artistic through poetry, right? Because poems are just little stories that kind of rhyme and like feel good, you know. And I just love that. And so I've always kind of been writing. Now, how that intersects with where I'm at, like online, what kind of happened was,
That's interesting. What
yeah.
what you just said. Like, so poetry is sort of like storytelling,
Oh, 100%.
but that rhymes.
Yes.
It's feel good. So that's the emotion
Yes.
you kind of do.
I think.
How'd you get into that conclusion? Is that a learning for yourself, or you can? By the way, you can just tie the screws. Or,
Oh, sick.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
perfect.
Take your
Perfect.
time. Yeah,
Perfect. Okay. There we go.
yeah.
Okay. So sorry. Repeat the question there again.
So the question is, you just explained that beautifully. Poetry is storytelling. It's just a different way of telling a story, where the story rhymes, where the story is, it's a feel good way of sharing a story. And I think as a consumer of the art, for me, that's what I feel on the consumption end when I listen to a poetry. So the first thing I notice is definitely the beauty of the words, right? I know how it rhymes and how it flows. The second thing I notice is, all right, so the emotion behind the words. The third thing I notice is, okay, there's a story behind it too. So I think the explanation you gave was really beautiful. I was like, how'd you come into that conclusion? Sort of, this is poetry. Because that's, on one end, I feel like it takes a journey for you to derive simple conclusions of the mundane things that you do. Like, you have an understanding of what you're doing, you keep doing it, and then you have to get to a point where you have some resistance, and then you take some time off, and then you reflect, and then you come back and go, oh, this is what this is. And that's an aha moment, right?
Yes. Oh, 100%.
So I was just asking about the
No,
journey
100%. I think that realization really came from like reading poetry. Even before I started really writing it, when you read through like Billy Collins or like any of the great modern poets, like there's always a story to be derived, and sometimes more literally and sometimes less. Like sometimes there's very abstract poetry that, the writer creates it in a way where you can derive your own story. And there's very literal poetry where it's like a very set, this is what's going on. And I think that's kind of when I realized it, the story, I think, all art forms are like a form of storytelling, whether it be like a picture or a movie or a song, whatever it is, it all like kind of tells a story. And I think great artists are able to take very important stories and translate that into their art medium. And that's what really good art is, when you have a storyteller who expresses it through talent. But that's kind of, to answer your question, that's so, and
the most interesting part about it is, whoever painted this picture, for instance, could tell a story, but every time I look at this picture, I can derive 10 different
100%,
stories.
100%.
Maybe I'll get into perfect sync with what he was thinking, but most of the time, you can derive something else out of it.
100%, 100%.
So it's almost like a catalyst that kind of like stimulates different feelings, emotions, and stories within yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you were always writing, and then you were like, okay, so let me do it on a more scale, or do you do it like so what's the story behind it?
Yeah, okay, 100%.
So like, beginning, you were someone who was interested in poetry. It kind of gave you, like, it was entertaining for you, for instance. It was thought-provoking for you. So you started consuming the content, you started doing something by yourself, to 400,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
On poetry. So what's that story?
Okay, 100%. So like I said, I've always been into poetry, and so I kind of, in the beginning of this year, I was like, maybe I should start writing more. So I start writing more, and then I'm like, okay, like
beginning of 2024?
Yes. Yeah. Beginning of this year.
So beginning of this year, you have no followers on Instagram, or you
No,
just
zero.
Zero.
January 0.
No way.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know.
No, yeah.
I thought that was like at least 2 to 3 years.
No. So the
Beginning of 2024, you had 0 followers. Now you have 400,000
Correct.
followers.
Yeah.
All right, so tell me started.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's with only doing like 50 posts. Like, I've only posted 50 times, which is like a crazy metric. But anyways.
Yeah. Do you know anyone else with this metrics?
Not off the top of my head.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, so the beginning of
Talk
this
about
year.
beginner's luck. Eh?
Yeah, no, 100%. No, there's a lot of luck involved, which I'll get into all that.
Sure,
But,
yeah.
So it's the beginning of this year, and I just gotten back from Hawaii, and the contrast from going to like beautiful Hawaii to like the dead of winter Canada was like, if I'll be honest, a little depressing. And so I wasn't like in the best place. I was trying to get a job, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'll start writing how I feel. And so I start doing that, and then I start writing more and more. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it would be cool, like if I had like a library I could come back to, and like 5 years from now I could watch back and I could see how I felt, like by reciting it. So film myself reciting it, and then I could see how I felt. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. Maybe I'll put them on. So I start doing that. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll put some on Instagram. And my idea was like in 5 years I'll come back and I'll see these videos. No one else will see them. Like I'll just see them, and it will be like I'll treat it like free cloud storage, if that makes sense. So I did that. I posted 1, 2, and then I think the first one got like 2,000 views, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like 2,000 people saw my work. Like I was like, that's amazing. Like that's incredible. Maybe I'll kind of start trying. So I put like a little more effort in. I still haven't told anyone. Like I don't like, it was just like my secret little thing. And then I think I posted the 5th video.
0 followers, 2,000 views.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And then I think that got me, when I remember when I hit like 10 followers, I was like freaking out. Like I was like, dude, this is insane. Like the idea that 10 people, because 10 people online is nothing, but like if you imagine like 10 people like in this room, like dude, 10 people saw what I was creating. Like that's like phenomenal. That's like amazing. Yeah. And it's so interesting because, so like I'm saying, I post my 5th video and it goes to 16,000 views overnight. And I am freaking out. And when I say, and it's so interesting because I'll post a video now that will go to like 1 million or like 500,000. I was more excited about that video hitting 16 than any other post I've made since. Like it was insane. So overnight it goes to 16,000, which is absolutely nothing. And then through the course of the day, it ends up going to like 1 million. And so I'm freaking out. This is amazing. So that ends up kicking in the first video I ever created back into the algorithm, because people go to my page, they go to the first video I made, and then that video goes to 10 million. And from there, I went from 0 followers to 100,000 followers in 30 days. And then from there, I go to 200,000 followers in 60 days, 300,000 in 90 days. And then I was posting twice a week. And then after that, I kind of like, not burnt out, but kind of like, I found myself kind of creating for the algorithm and not for my original joy of writing. Like I started enjoying the writing process less, because I would write a poem and then I'm like, oh, maybe this first line isn't catchy enough. Let me change it. Maybe this ending isn't, memorable enough. Let me change it. And I started altering my art to fit an algorithm instead of keeping it to who I was. And that kind of takes a toll on you. And so I ended up taking kind of a step back in August. I didn't post anything for all of August. And then only a couple even in September. And now I'm just kind of starting to get back into it. But yeah, like it was a crazy. Ooh, yeah.
So what was your feeling like? Were you tripping? Like, what were you doing? Like, you're like, holy, this is crazy. This is 16,000, 1 million, 100,000 followers. And the numbers, that's just, I don't know, like from 0 to 10 to like 100,000, it's like.
It wasn't the numbers that got me. It was like the personal experiences, that the feedback I got back, and the small encounters in the midst of it. So for example, like, a video would go to 1 million, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. But, there'd be a comment on that video of someone's like life story, or a comment on like how this, poem changed their life perspective, or a comment on, I do like a romantic poem, and like all the comments would be like these love stories of like these couples who have been together for like 50 years, 60 years. And that was when I was like, wow, like I'm creating something that people are really resonating with. And that was always more, not important, but more of a shock than the actual like number of views. Because the number of views is just a number to me. But when you actually like, get DM like messages from people, and when you actually get comments from people, or you get like people that you've known, like the craziest thing for me is like people that I've known, not celebrities, but kind of like influencers, like, and they'll like my post or comment on my post. That's those human interactions in a social media field are so much more valuable than a number, if that makes sense.
Yeah. if I mean the question is if that makes sense. I have to think.
No,
You
no,
know?
100%. Take your time.
Yeah. No, it would be hard to relate, right? Like, because I feel like it's almost like if you go to someone who's like, I mean, put yourself in someone else's shoes who doesn't have, for instance, money for food, right? And then you would say something along the lines of, yeah, money's not important, right? Now, you get there after you have the money, right? So it's sort of like that, because when you're outside, when you don't have the followers, I would assume like a lot of people that's what they would seek, numbers.
Yes.
You are able to say
Oh,
this
yes,
because you're on the other side of the fence.
Yes.
right?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
The things that you find valuable at the bottom of the mountain are going to change 100 times on your way up to the top.
Correct. And you feel different. It's not the numbers.
100%.
It's like
Yeah.
the interactions and all that stuff. When you go back and listen to your first poetry, do you ever do that? Do you?
Every once in a while.
What do you feel? This could have been done better.
Oh,
or-
100%. Oh, 100%.
You feel
like
that?
my first video is terrible. Like it was just filmed on my iPhone, like in the forest. Like it's very low quality. If I knew like it would reach 10 million people, I might have done it differently. But I think it's also part of that, raw experience that kind of helped it get there, right? So in a way, I wouldn't want to change it. I think when I go back now to my early poetry, well, okay, there's different phases because my early poetry I feel like was really genuine and I really appreciate it. Kind of there was that middle phase where I was just making things for the algorithm. When I go back and I watch that, I'm like, wow, did I really put that out there? So there's a little bit of like, hindsight judgment, if that makes sense, on some of it. But for the most part, yeah, I really enjoy it.
So on a scale, like if you were to look at the ones you did early, technically those could be done better. But at the end of the day, you did it because it made you happy.
Correct.
But the ones in the middle are sort of like done for the algorithm.
Yeah.
Which ones do you hate more? Or not hate, like, but dislike more?
Definitely the ones I did for the algorithm, or the ones that I rushed out, the ones that like, this could have been a super, like, this could have been like a multi-million view idea.
Right.
But I rushed it out when I could have taken more time developing it, if that makes sense. And those are the ones I really kind of regret. But I don't regret anything. Like everything is like a different step on the journey. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Are you a people person, or are you more reserved and sort of like, or do you have a balance, like,
I would say balance. I very much enjoy being with people and being social, but I feel like, the concept of introvert versus extrovert is like where you derive your energy from. So you're extroverted if you get your energy from being with people, and you're introverted if you get your energy from being alone. And I find more of my energy coming from when I'm alone, in alone time.
Interesting. So, that's very interesting. Do you find you get energy from so you get more energy from being by yourself?
100%. Well, I'm not going to say 100%. I think there's a split. I think no one's like 100% one or the other. But 9 times out of 10, I'd rather like, if I feel low energy, I'd rather just kind of be by myself and kind of gather my thoughts, if that makes sense.
Okay. So, what's your perspective on people? Do you think every single person have something creative in them? And do you think all the people should try to do more creative stuff or explore their creative side?
100%. And I think, it's so interesting you say this, because I was thinking about this the other day. 100%. Everyone as humans, we're like creative. Like our base point is creative. But we live in such a consumption culture where that creativity is getting smothered out by consuming other people's, if that makes sense. So 99% of the population consumes 1% of the creative work, right? There's the 1% who actually get out there and create and make things, and then the other 99 just kind of consume what they do. And I feel like that has kind of smothered out a lot of people's, not creativity, but actual drive to create something. Also, the idea of, everything's already been done. Like with the invention of the internet, we can see all these people's poetry, work, painting. So it kind of creates this problem of, why would I try if someone's already taken that picture, painted that picture, written that piece, kind of thing. So I think everyone is creative, but the culture we live in is very much attacking that, if that makes sense.
Yes. And also, I think constraints are what limits a lot of people too.
Okay, tell me about it.
There's a lot of constraints that I find. Okay, so if you are not intentionally, like for instance, the realization that your capabilities are not limited to the certain set ways of life, that is going to school and things like that, then it's, then you really have that freedom to explore creativity, because by the time you're like right now, look at you, right? You're not limited by constraint. I mean, tomorrow, if you want to drop everything that you do here, leave to Austin, start a new life, what is stopping you?
Yeah.
Nothing, right? I think you're very fortunate in that regard, where your parents created that environment for you, and then you were a good kid, so you kind of like adapted to it, and that's what got you what you have today, right? It was like, a lot of things going in the right
Yes,
direction.
correct.
Now let's talk about a different circumstance, where this was not the case, right? Not that their parents were bad people. They did things with bad intentions. They didn't know any better, so they decided to sort of like follow everyone else who's in their neighborhood, or their friends and their family, whatever. Now the kid, what happens with the kid is, a lot of times the kid just goes through life, and then this realization comes to the kid by themselves when they are on their late 20s. And at that point, there's so many constraints that's holding them back. Now, this could be like mental blocks,
Yes.
and this could be actual financial, right? Maybe you got like a $50,000 student loan. You want to be creative. You want to leave your day to, full-time job, but that $50,000
Yes,
loan
okay,
is
okay.
hanging
Yes,
on top of your, head, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Or it could be, you entangle yourself in relationships, maybe, or you have like $100,000 job, and it's an opportunity cost for you to leave that and then go be creative. I mean, me personally, I think none of it should stop people. They should, like at any point in my life, I'm like, if anything else gives me a better experience, I'm ready to leave everything that I have and then proceed, as long as I'm provided with health. That's the only thing that
Yes,
that I don't have control over. But as long as I have health, but some people are limited because of those constraints, I feel.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting thought process. And to that, I'll say, so for one, I don't think creative expression should be treated as like this all or nothing, right? You can still have, like, I still have a job. Like, I work 40 hours a week, and I just do it in my, like, I just do writing in like my free time. Like, it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing. Like, creativity doesn't have to be like 40 hours a week or nothing. It can be 5 minutes in the afternoon. It can be 15 minutes. And then that idea, it's so interesting because like you forget like the whole culture of like the starving artist, right? Like, so for example, you look at artists like Van Gogh, who, lived his whole life in poverty just because he loved art. And then he didn't even get famous till after he was gone, right? So I think you got to really love the art enough to do it. But I don't think the idea of having certain financial constraints necessarily stops someone from expressing their creativity, if that makes sense.
So it's not one or the other. Like, okay, so for instance, you feel like you're a gifted painter. You don't necessarily have to be a full-time painter right off the bat.
No, 100%.
You continue to do whatever you're doing, but in the free time, now instead of consuming, if your friends are hanging out and having alcohol or like smoking weed, maybe you don't have to sign up for that. If you don't enjoy, instead you can dedicate that time into painting, right?
Yes. And I think a lot of that free time today is just kind of honestly caught up like within, like, I know I post on social media, so I'm kind of part of the problem, but like within social media and within TikTok and within YouTube and within Instagram, we've created a society where it is so easy not to be bored. If you're bored, you just go on your phone and you scroll. If you're waiting in line at Subway, you scroll. If you're using the bathroom, you scroll. Like, it's impossible to be bored. And if you're never bored, why would you ever bother doing something great? And so I think that culture, more than anything, has devastated the creative arts.
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true, because like I would be like sitting back with my friends, and then we would probably put our head down and like watch reels for like 2 hours, right?
Oh, 100%.
And then I was out with my one of my friends yesterday, and the night before, we went to London. We went to London downtown. We went to a bar. We sat down, like we had a drink, and then we had a conversation. Yesterday we went out. We went to the factory. We walked around, and we went for the movie Godfather, right?
Yeah.
They were re-releasing it, playing it in Imagine Cinemas downtown London. So we went for that. So it's just like when it comes to like, okay, it's cold outside. I could go and learn salsa with $10 cover, versus I just sit back and just watch YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels for 2
100%.
hours, and then
100%.
the YouTube Shorts or Reels are more satisfying.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So there's so many examples. Like, it's just
infinite.
infinite examples. Like, okay, so why would I go out and ask a girl out when I can just? I mean, it's also like things. I think you put yourself through. Because those things are a bit uncomfortable for you to get into. Start off with. Because you have to dress up.
It's difficult.
You have to get in a
gotta
car.
get ready.
You have to drive.
Yes, 100%.
You have to get there. Versus, I don't know. I'm just gonna sit back and
and
watch
you get
a movie.
the same like dopamine hit. Like if the payout kind of feels the same in the short term, but in the long run, that's when you really feel the.
But it is not the same. As in, like, okay, so every time when I spend 2 hours watching an Instagram reel, I'm left with a feeling where I have some sort of guilt trip.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't. I mean, while I'm watching it, probably I'm enjoying and I'm having fun.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like in the short term, in the immediate, you're like, this
Yes.
is great. This is just as good as being out with my friends, or just as good as creating this. But in the long run, you look back and you're like, shoot, I just wasted 2 hours.
But it's such an addiction too.
Oh, 100%.
Addiction in the sense, okay, I'm watching an Instagram reel, and okay, so I watched one. Now this is not satisfying enough for me. So and then I scroll up, and then I got another one which I'm very satisfied with. Then I'm like, oh, I'm really satisfied. Let me watch another one. Then I get another one which is I'm not satisfied with. So let me watch another one which I get satisfied with. It's such. I feel like it's a drug.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
It just acts like a drug.
And it will steal your life. Like it's so interesting because I would look up like these calculators that would calculate how much of your life you'll spend on your phone, and like you plug in your average like weekly screen time, and then it like does all the math, like years of your life.
Do you do something to kind of like get out of it?
Oh, yeah.
I when I personally the last 2 months, like what I do is, it also depends on the way I start. Like for instance. So if I start a day where I work out, then I try to stay away from my phone for the first like 3 hours or so. Like when I say stay away, not consume any content for the first 3 hours. And then let's say I start working at 9 and then I spend like 2 hours working. And then if I'm able to, let's say for my first break when I'm going to eat something, if I'm able to not see my phone, just eat like without seeing my phone, it gives me so much control over the day as opposed to if I give in and then if I watch something while I'm eating,
it's a snowball effect.
It's a snowball effect. Yes. It's so dangerous to kind of like fall into it.
Yes, and it's interesting because I find so often like the first 2 hours of my day kind of dictate the last 22 hours of my day. Like, so if I spend the first 2 wasted, I'll feel unproductive for the rest of the day. Whereas if I get out there and like I go on a run and I, write this or I do this, then the rest of my day, it kind of sets a tone. So those first 2 hours are very important. So the biggest thing I would definitely recommend is a crazy idea, but don't sleep with your phone in your room. Like plug it in and charge it somewhere else, get an alarm clock. Because that 100% prevents you, number one, from staying up late. Like, do you know how many nights I've wasted, like, staying up late, just scrolling on my phone? And number two, it keeps you from being on your phone, like, first thing in the morning. And that will set, like, a huge difference. So I would say that's one thing. Also, there's a product that I'm really enjoying. It's called Brick. And how it works is, so you set in your settings, in the settings of the app, what apps you can and cannot access when it's, like, quote, bricked. And then you tap your phone on it and it will lock it. And then the only way to unlock it is to physically tap your phone on it again. Does that make sense? So if I lock Instagram, I'll tap it on the brick. I'll go out with my friends. I cannot open Instagram until I come home to unlock it.
Brick?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. What is it?
It's like actual, like a physical little brick that you stick on your mat or you stick on your fridge, or you can put it wherever. And it locks you out of all like distracting apps, even websites. And I've found some pretty good success with that. And it's so much like just that. And it's interesting because when I do that, I realize how addicted I am, because I'll go to open the app. Like I won't be thinking, and I'll like open the app and it will say,
that's pretty cool.
It will say, oh, you're locked out.
How much is it?
I can't remember the price. I'll send it to you after.
Amazon?
No, it's a small company. They're just like, they're in their early stages. They're doing really well. And it's really cool.
That is pretty sick.
Yeah. I'll send you the link after.
Oh, that probably helps. Yeah, man, it's just like smoking.
100%. It's worse.
Do you think people are going to realize that at some point?
I think a lot of people do realize it. They just don't want to. It's a painful like admitting that you have an addiction is is like not an easy thing to do, right? And so especially when it's something as so nonchalant and casual as like scrolling on your phone, right? So I think a lot of people do realize it, but it's hard to kind of get over that.
It's so, it's just like it has become such a habit. Like, okay, for instance, you're out with your friends and then there's that awkward moment of silence. There you go, like immediately you pull out your phone and you're on your phone, head down, and that's not awkward anymore. Like when there's a silence, it's awkward.
It's too easy to escape.
Yeah, now you want to walk through a alleyway and then there's like people staring, or you feel like probably people are not looking at you, but you feel like people are looking at you. It's just easier for you to pull out your phone and like pretend like you're just doing something busy in your phone and walk through it instead of actually facing people. It's so man, like it's crazy.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of one of the kind of leading back into what we were talking about. One of the big stoppers in like modern day creativity and modern day creative expression is just it's easier not to do it. And so I think that kills a lot of it.
So in your life, like so you practice break, and is there anything else that you implement kind of like helps you with?
I think when it comes to like my quote unquote media addiction, those are the two big ones. And then just the realization of, because there are still times where I'll scroll for like, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up to an hour. Just kind of, you got to realize, look, like the next video isn't going to make my life any better, and I'm just wasting time. And that, just be honest with yourself, and that will also take you a long way.
Yeah. And then, so now do you have like a goal? Like, you will write let's say one poetry a week, or it's just, you don't put yourself through that?
Yeah. Okay. So
that's, I've heard like, inspiration comes and goes, like, you don't control it.
Exactly. Yeah. I kind of have very soft deadlines, if that makes sense, because the worst thing you can do to yourself when you're writing is be like, okay, between 4 and 5, I'm going to write a poem, because who knows where you're going to be creatively between 4 and 5. Like, you can't plan it out, right?
Yeah.
And so I like to write every day, but I don't set a certain time for that. Just like whenever I feel like super creative and like I want to express something, then I'll write something.
And every time you express, it's not like, it's a smooth flow. You have to face some resistance, and you get to a flow state.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, it's so interesting, because like there's some days I'll sit there for, like, I'm not exaggerating, like an hour or an hour and a half with just like my pen, and I can't think of anything. And then like an idea will just like come in my head. So it's actually, I have this one cool story. So there's one poem I wrote that did like very well. I think it did 4 or 5 million. And it came from me sitting on my bed with a pen for an hour. And I told myself, it was in the morning, and I told myself I need to have this poem written by 10:30. And that was like 2 hours from when I had started. And 10:45 comes around, and I have nothing written down. And I just got this idea of the opening line. It's 10:45, and I promised I'd have it all figured out by 10:30. And then from that, like, I wrote a whole poem about like avoiding scheduling your life like that. And it was like amazing, and it did really well. So like, you'll sit for a couple hours. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes you'll just immediately start writing like a whole book. It's so interesting how creativity comes and goes. But yeah, so don't be discouraged, like, if you go to create something and you have nothing for the first little bit.
Do you have like favorite poems that you've written?
100%. Yeah, everyone does.
Do you like grade it, like, tape 1, 2, 3, or is it like there's like two poems that are number one, or? So,
it's interesting because
it's
interesting because like I don't like grade them all individually, but I have like, I like this poem because it really shows how I felt in this moment, or I like this poem because it really has good rhyming meter, or I like this poem because it's a really good story. So I like all these different poems, but I like them all for different reasons. So there's no way to actually put them on a grading.
What's one of your favorite poems?
I really enjoy there's one I did about, it's a story of like 2 men in a graveyard, and it's kind of, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's kind of paints this story of like what's important in life, if that makes sense. So it's like, the concept is there's 2 men buried in a graveyard, and every night they come up and they talk about their lives, and one was super rich and one was super poor but had really good family and friends, and it kind of just shows like at the end of the day like what's kind of more important. And I really appreciate it because I was able to encapsulate like a whole story in a very short amount of time with very good rhyming pattern. And so that's kind of why I really appreciate that one. That one's up there.
Can you tell me the story? Like, so story of the origin of that particular poem.
Of that particular poem?
Yes.
So that one I was, it was 10:30 at night. I also find that I write better at night. I don't know why, for whatever reason. 10:30 at night, and I usually, like, when I go to write, like, I'll play some music and I'll start pacing, like, in my room. And I have, so in my room I have a giant whiteboard on the wall. I have a giant mirror, and I have a giant dresser drawer with a glass top, and then I'll carry a dry erase marker, and I'll either write on the mirror, the desk, or the whiteboard, like whatever is available or closest.
That's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's actually.
Did you come up with it, or?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it just I don't know, it kind of happened one day. I realized, like, it's so funny. I realized my dresser drawer, I have, like, this huge dresser, and it has a glass top. I'm like, oh shoot, I could probably write on that. And so, like, a lot of my poems are just written out on top of my dresser, just because it's very easy. Dry erase, you can like erase it and like redo it or change this or whatever, and it's very, very convenient, and it's marker, so it's easy to see. But anyway, so I pace back and forth with this marker, and then.
So when you say pace, you're just walking around.
Yeah, just walking back and forth, playing some music, trying to see kind of what story I want to tell this time. And then I just kind of get this first line of, there are two men buried in a cemetery by my house. So I just write that down. And from there, I have no idea where this is going. Like, I have no idea. Like this could be a story about anything. And then the next one is like, and every night they come up, or I can't remember what the second line is. And I write that down. I'm like, okay, so this is a really good first line. I really like how this is sounding. What story do I want to tell with it? So I don't know. I remember I explained to you kind of my creative process is you either find a really good line, and from there you work back and you find a story, or you either find a really good story, and from there you work back and find a really good line. I think a lot of my poetry has those two things, a very memorable line matched with a very memorable story. I think that's very important. So in this specific instance, I found a very memorable line, and I worked back, and I'm like, okay, I would love to tell this story of like what's important in life, money versus family, and then from there I wrote out the whole thing, and then
How long was that?
probably a solid hour and a half.
Right. No. How many words?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I don't
Like
know how
500.
well, okay, the whole story, yes, probably. Like, it was just a whole paragraph
Right.
of the story. Like, it didn't rhyme, a lot of it even didn't really make sense, and then I slept on
So
that.
would you give them names? Okay, this is John and Albert.
No, not in this. No, sometimes I do, but not in this specific one. I just left them untitled,
Yeah.
and then write out a paragraph. Then I sleep on
So
that.
this is person A's story. This is person B's story.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
And
And then sleep on that, and then the next morning kind of formulate it into a poem, and then sleep on that the next day, kind of finalize it, and then film it, and then etc.
Can you recite the actual poem?
I don't have this one memorized off the top
No.
of my head. Unfortunately, no, which is a bummer because it's a good one. But I could probably pull it up on my phone if you're interested in that.
Go for
okay,
it.
My phone's just over here. One sec.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. Do you ever think about like enhancing the actual poem with giving it music? Is that something you think about, or not really?
Like, how do you mean?
Like giving it a background score, or like some sort of music behind it.
Like writing, like doing the music myself?
Yeah, so to speak. So it adds another layer to it, right?
Oh yeah, okay. So it's interesting because a lot of my poetry, like I'll find a song that I like and I'll write to that song and I'll have that song on repeat for like the whole time I'm writing it.
Okay.
And then I'll put that as the background audio for Instagram because it
Interesting.
just matches it so well because it's written to that song. And then there are other poems I write in silence and I just match it with any random song. But so yeah, to answer your question, yes, that is definitely part of the thought process.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Let me find it here. I have like 100 poems in my Google Docs. Okay, so I have it here.
Go
I
for
hope
it.
I don't butcher it. I won't do my
You're
usual
for it.
theatrical
Yeah.
thing. I'll just kind of read it to you. So
Or no, do the actual.
no,
Yeah.
it doesn't work the same. But
All right,
okay.
okay, yeah.
There are two men buried in a cemetery by my house, one beside the other. And every night when no one's around, they furtively step out of the ground to converse regarding the life they left, reminiscing a time life before death. The first man tells wild stories of money and power and boasts the height of his tombstone compared to the other, but the second man remains silent, and no words find his mouth. Then, when the sun rises, they both crawl back into the cold, dank chambers of their existence. And this process is repeated, just as described, until one night the first man asks the second guy, "Why do you sit so quietly? Are you not happy with the life you left?" Without hesitation, the silent drew his breath, and he spoke. "For your tombstone is bigger, but your flowers are dead, and no one maintains the grass overhead. It would seem money and power forgot who you were, found a new host, don't need you anymore. And I have a question on the subject thereof. Did your money reciprocate when told it was loved? Did your power give comfort through life's various attacks? Did all that you own ever once smile back? As for my silence, I seek no joy in proving the happiness I found in the life I was given, the people I was given. My value to this world is not measured in graphs and numbers. This can only be found in the hearts of loved ones. And God is my witness, I face not one day alone. And time will fill this yard with others I know, and you will be the quiet one."
So there's like so many subtle things about that poem.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So the guy who was rich and he had a lot of wealth or a lot of materialistic possession, he was also boastful, right? He was also like bragging
Yeah.
about everything he owned, like flexing. And the other guy kept silence all along. And then at the end, his reaction was basically what he cared for in his life was more along the lines of the happiness he shared with other people.
100%. Yeah.
And towards the end, he's also compassionate, I think, right? In a way.
If that's how you want to derive it, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to say no. It's
Yeah.
like however you see it is how you see it. But originally, I didn't write it to be like that. If that makes sense.
So it's
I
two
think-
people bragging about like.
No. I think the one guy in my mind, the one guy's bragging, "Oh, I have this," and then the other guy's like, "Yeah, but you were going after all the wrong things, and over the next 50 years, like all my family will pass away and be buried with me, and when we all come up, I'll have all my people, and I'll be celebrating, and I'll be loud with them, and you'll be sitting alone, and you will be the quiet one."
Ooh, yeah. Interesting. That's a very it's very deep. Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I really appreciate that one, because I was able to convey like a very powerful message with a very good story, with very good rhyming, with very good meter, and so that's kind of
It makes you think. It is supposed to be thought provoking, I guess.
yeah 100%.
Because that thought hurts my brain.
Yeah.
When I give it thought, is that how it's gonna be? That's the thought it gives me.
Yeah 100%.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard the story. It's I don't know if I read it somewhere. It's about how a kid was asked to, like, kid was given a spoon and then put some oil in the spoon and then asked to take it to the king in the palace. So the kid was told, very strictly, "Hey, listen, like, make sure you don't spill no oil, right? Please don't spill no oil. Just get this to the king." So the kid ends up carrying the spoon to the king, and the kid goes up to the king and delivers the spoon full of oil, not a drop, right? The king said, "Good job, but did you enjoy my palace? Did you see the palace?" The kid was like, "No, because I was just extremely careful not to spill the oil, right? No, just go back and enjoy my castle and come back again, right?" So the kid goes back and he enjoys the castle. It's beautiful, the paintings, the whole arts and the craftsmanship, the architecture, beautiful. The kid enjoys everything, and he comes back to the king. Now the kid says, "Yeah, it was great. It was a terrific palace, right? And there's no oil in the spoon." The king says, the goal is to see the whole palace, but not to spill the oil. So your poetry is like it's like that. It's kind of like It just puts you in a very uncomfortable position with your mind.
Yeah.
Trying to comprehend the whole idea.
Yeah.
while trying to understand if what's right and what's wrong, and if there's a right or if there's wrong.
Yeah.
And what I feel like what we are trying to do at every point in time is kind of like derive conclusion and make that into a principle that you can follow with. So the more principles you have, the more freedom you have, because those things can be set on autopilot.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But these things, what it does is it puts you in a position where you cannot derive an easy conclusion. And that's where I think these thoughts are really good if you're going away. It's been a challenge for me. Like every time when I go away and try to spend time in solitude, I just miss having conversations. And then you start having conversation with yourself, and you realize you are truly boring. There's to yourself.
Yeah.
You're only as interesting as how the other person reciprocates or reacts when you tell your story.
Yes.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
And when there's no, when you don't have that validation or that sort of like response from the other person, you're pretty boring. By yourself.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you seek like I said, like, a real life example would be me going away on a solitude or a solo trip to Algonquin for a hike. And then I walked, so I was just taking rest and I was eating a fruit. And this 9th grader walks up to me, and then he was just enjoying the view with me. Turns out he started hiking with his parents, but he was ahead. So he just,
very good.
And then we ended up hiking together for the rest of the trip. So
Oh, no
that's
way.
a solo trip for me.
Yeah.
I end up finding someone, and then
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
spend the rest
Fair
of the
enough.
trip with somebody else, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
But these kind of thoughts are, instead of having your cell phone, or then what I do is if I'm by myself, I just stuff my face with like a ton of food to a point where it starts giving me acid reflux or something, and then it's just a self-destructive thing, right? Because I think what you're faced with is this boredom by yourself when you spend in solitude. So one of the things that I am left with after having that conversation with you is maybe next time when I'm by myself, I should explore one of these thoughts.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
In complete solitude.
And you'll also find that there's a certain point you get to where it becomes enjoyable. And like the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. But there's a certain point you get to where you really enjoy your own company. And more or less, I would say the lack of other people's influence. Like when you're by yourself and you're not on your phone, you're not being influenced externally. And so you find kind of your most genuine thoughts and ideas and beliefs outside of what anyone else is trying to tell you or convince you of. And that is a very enjoyable state of being.
It's fascinating. Yeah. I just lost my chain of thoughts there.
No, you're good. You're good. Take your time.
I was like, it's crazy, the whole idea. And even like, so I was actually hiking with my boys one of these days, and then we came across like a tree where someone's like memorial was stamped with few lines in it, right? And I don't know if I can recall those lines, but the lines were something along the lines of from bashes to ashes and everything in between. He was a true keeper of the ravine. Or the ravine.
Okay, interesting. Okay, very cool.
Yeah. And then that just gives you that single line of thought just helps you visualize, all right, so this guy, he was a true keeper of the ravine, right? So it gives you a sense or like a window into his life. Just experience a few things. The words are so powerful that way.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. So do you go into those zones? Like, do you have those zones where you kind of like introspectively, let me try to understand this. Let me seek truth with which side is like, how should I be, like, especially with the point that you wrote, where do I stand on this? Am I with the first guy? Am I with the second guy? Or am I trying to do better than the first and the second guy? Do you personalize it? So, or, tie yourself into it?
I think there are always, in any character I write, there's parts of each character I relate to, and then you see that brought up in it, if that makes sense. So as the creator of both characters, naturally I feel a certain way. I relate a certain amount to each one, if that makes sense. So instead of being presented with these characters and being like, which one am I more like? I'm actually presenting these characters with a little bit of each of me. There's so much of me that so much wants like a very financially successful future. And there's so much of me that wants a very family oriented future. And so you see both of those, and the whole story is kind of, an internal presentation of that, if that makes sense.
Got it. Okay, so coming back to 2024, first 3 months goes by. Now you have like 400,000 followers, or like 300,000 followers.
Yeah, something around that.
Heading towards 400,000. Now life is different. Like if I were to come to you and talk to you in 2023, right? Like, and then like so, or put it like this: change that frame of thought. 2023, Josh has a conversation with 2024. Josh in October. So so the Josh in 2023 October having a conversation with Josh in 2024 October.
Okay.
And if the Josh tells the story to the other Josh, the 2024 Josh tells the whole story to the 2023 Josh. 2023 Josh is going to be holy shit.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah. No.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So what are some of those cool things? Like you were like, holy, this is
the difference is
wild.
okay. Okay. Very interesting. There are so many. Every experience kind of presents you with so many different learning opportunities and learning experiences. So I think that would be the biggest difference, the biggest takeaway. I think one of the biggest things I learned was like the idea of now I'm like so much more open to trying things, because this was just such a one-off. Like I tried uploading 5 videos onto Instagram, and now I have a potential future endeavor from it. And also a lot of cool experiences that I've been able to do and travel and go to. And just by uploading like 5 things and by trying something that a lot of people don't try. And so now I'm more open to, okay, what if I tried this, or what if I tried that, and what if I tried this, and that might fail, that might fail, that might fail. But if I found the success with this, that can be copied and pasted into so many different areas of my life. So I think that's the biggest thing, the idea of I'm not as afraid to try new things, if that makes sense, because I understand now that there's actual payout on the other side of that.
Do you ever sit back and go, what if I did not get any of these views?
Oh, 100%.
What if I just have like 100 followers
100%,
and then like 300 views?
Yeah, 100%. So, and I think I would be just as happy, or not happy, but I think I would feel the same. So, for example, if right now I had 100,000 followers, I would be in the same mental state as I am now. With 400, or let's say over the last 6 months I got 20,000 followers, I feel like I would be in the same.
Let's say you just got 200 followers.
I think that might be a little different, because I feel like that at that point I would still be treating it as my own personal thing instead of trying to reach globally. So that would be a little bit of a difference, but even still, like it's very much the same. My current state of being, I feel like would be very much the same at all these different follower accounts, because everything is so relative, and because it happens so quickly, I have no concept of how hard or easy what I did was. Like, I don't know if what I did was just luck, or what it was a little bit of skill, or a little bit of this. It's like, imagine you entered business with no experience, and then in 5 months you became a millionaire. You would be just as happy if those 5 months you had $100,000 or $2 million or $250,000
Correct.
or $60,000. You would be just as happy, because you have no idea how hard or how difficult what you did was. You have no idea how impressive it was. You're totally new to it. So any success is good success, and you would be just as content.
I guess you will never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's that's wild. Well, you told me about that cool story about like meeting Theo Warren.
Oh yeah. I can touch on that. Yeah. So that's probably like the pinnacle of my career.
That's
and
your like top like.
Yeah, 100%. And Instagram is so funny, because it could be here today and gone tomorrow, but that experience makes everything so worth it. So it's a crazy cool story. So I'm in my room. I think I'm writing at the time. It's late at night, and I check my notifications, and in Instagram, if you have a certain amount of followers, it will only give you notifications for like important people who interact with your posts.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like,
no way.
Yeah, priority.
So it works the other way. Because right now, when you don't have no followers, it gives you
all the
totally
notifications.
irrelevant. It'll be like, your friend's friend liked on something else.
Yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
which,
Yeah.
you know, we don't really care about it.
After you reach a certain
Right.
threshold, it's just like
It's the
if,
complete
like,
opposite.
famous people do it. It was very cool.
Okay.
So I check and
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So it's kind of like all the way on the other side. Exclusive.
Yeah. So it's you go to your notification center and it says priority, and then it will list all the people like over 100,000 followers who interacted with your stuff. And so one of them was a gentleman, Dermot Kennedy, and he's an artist from Ireland, and he does music, and he's very prominent in the music industry, very successful in the music industry, has worked with like some incredible producers like Mike Dean, who's the guy who like invented Kanye, and like all these very impressive producers. So and I had heard of him, so I'm like, oh, that's crazy. Like Dermot liked one of my. It was actually the one of the men in the graveyard, and so I was very stoked. And then so I follow him, and I see that he posted me on his story too, which was incredible, which helped that poem actually get the reach that it did. But and then so I'm in my room and I'm writing things down. I'm in my flow state, and then I get a message from him, and he's like, "Hey, I love your work. Where are you based?" And for whatever reason, I decided to say that I was from Nashville. Like, I am from Nashville, but I haven't lived there in years. So I said, I'm from Nashville. Right now, I'm living in Canada. And he said, no way, I'm in Nashville right now. I'm writing music. I'm working on my new album. I have a show coming up at the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville, and I would love for you to be part of it. So I'm like, and he said, so if you can get here by August 13th, I'd love for you to be part of it. I'm like, okay, this is crazy. Like, this is super cool. So I'm like, yes, like 100%. Like, I'm very much just like, and at the time, like, I was supposed to go on a family vacation. I had all these things going on, but I'm very much like Richard Brand has this concept of like, say yes and figure out how to do it later. So I'm like immediately like, yes. Cause if like in opportunities like this, if you have any hesitation, it's gone. Like, any hesitation is gone. So I'm like, yes, 100%. He's like, sweet. I'll put you in touch with my manager. We'll figure things out from there. And then he goes on and like plays a stadium of 80,000. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's just nuts. And so, I'm like, this is crazy. Okay, let's figure out who this guy is. I'm looking at like all the artists he's worked with, all the people he's toured with. Like, dude, like, this guy's like big time. And so, and the Bluebird Cafe is very iconic venue in Nashville. I don't know if you've heard of it. Like, that's like where Taylor Swift was discovered, and she recently played there like last year. Like, Olivia Rodrigo, Post Malone was just there. Like, it's very, very, very impressive venue, and a very unique opportunity. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. So I have to go to Halifax for a family reunion. I'm in Halifax, and Theo Vaughn is in Halifax doing a show. Then I have to fly to Nashville. On my way flying to Nashville, I have a layover in Philadelphia. I have to go use the washroom in Philadelphia in the airport. So I go in, and in the washroom is Theo Vaughn. And I'm washing my hands beside him, and I keep looking over, like, is that, like, he looks very familiar. In
just a random washroom?
Yeah, just in the airport. Just in the airport.
Nuts, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, but he's super famous. Don't other people like approach him?
He first of all, he disguised himself very well. So he was wearing like a big hoodie, pants. He had his hat all the way down, and he had like something around his neck.
Okay.
Yeah. And he travels very like casual. So it feels like he would be out of place. So I think I saw a couple other people approach him, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I'm washing my hands, and he's obviously tired because he's traveling. You know, he doesn't want to talk to anyone. So I'm like, "Are you Theo Vaughn?" And he's like, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "Oh, nothing. I love your work," or whatever. And then for whatever reason, I said, like, "Do you know who Dermot Kennedy is?" And then immediately, like, he switched from like, I'm traveling. I don't really want to talk to. Oh yeah, I'm going to a show tomorrow. And I said, no way, I'm going to be there. Like, I'm performing with him. And he said, no way, what was your name? And I said, I'm Joshua. He's like, it's nice to meet you. We fist bump. He's on the same plane as me. He's in the seat right behind me. And we fly to, so that's when I first met him. Fly to Nashville. And then the show is the next day. And so the next day comes, and I have a rehearsal. And he says, hey, you can just meet. Dermot texts me. And he says, hey, we're going to do a rehearsal. It's at 1:00. Meet at my buddy Gabe's house. Sends me an address. I have no idea who Gabe is. I show up to Gabe's house, and he has a beautiful house. And in the back, he has this huge garage. And then above the garage, there's this whole apartment, but it's a studio apartment. He's transformed it into a music studio. So I walk in, and there's all these instruments, all this recording equipment, like super expensive. And I'm like, holy cow, like, Gabe, what do you do? And he said, I'm a songwriter and a producer. I'm like, oh no way, that's like so cool. I'm like, who like have you worked with? And he said like most recently like I wrote like the Stick Season album for Noah Kahan, which is crazy because I'm like a huge Noah Kahan fan. So like I'm in the room where like part of the Stick Season album was like written with the man who's written part of the Stick Season album, and I'm freaking out. Like this is, I'm trying to keep my cool, but I'm like freaking out internally. And then Dermot shows up, and then we just have like a great little rehearsal, and then from there we go to we kind of split ways, and then the show is at 8, and then we show up to do the sound check, and it's such a cool experience. It was, in that moment I was not famous by any degree. I hadn't done anything even remotely compared to them, but I was able to see what that lifestyle was like, and it gave me like a little taste of kind of what could be possible out there, and that's what I'm most grateful for. And so we're all hanging out in the green room, and then we do the show, and Theo's like front row, and he gives me like a little nod, which is like amazing. And then after the show, we all meet up in the green room, and Theo comes back, and I get to have a good conversation with Theo. Like I get to talk to Theo Vaughn, which is like insane. And then we kind of all say our goodbyes and then split ways. And then it was the next day, Theo had Dermot on his podcast, on the Theo Vaughn podcast, and I got like a 2-minute like little clip in there where they were talking about the poetry. So I loved it. Very grateful to all parties involved for the amazing opportunity. And like I said, like if that is the pinnacle of everything I ever do with my art, it's so worth it.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. What were you? So you were internally freaking out but trying to keep your cool. Oh, what was that like?
I don't know. I feel like I didn't do the best job, but
so what do you mean? Like, you know,
I don't know. I feel like
what are some of those moments you go like, oh, shit, I just embarrassed myself.
Like,
oh man,
I think yeah. Even like a few, there were a few, like my dad dropped me off there, so I was getting ready to leave. I'm like, yeah, I'm just waiting for my dad to pick me up, and they both kind of looked at me weird, like, why is your dad picking you up? And then another time, like when we were doing the show, I accidentally called Dermot Kennedy Kermit instead of Dermot during the show, and that's something I will never live down. It was hilarious.
How did he react?
He's very good. Like he just laughed and then moved on. Like he's very, very quick with it. So but it was a great time. It was a great experience.
When you say like, you know, you got a taste of what it's like to be famous, what is it like to be famous?
I think the biggest lesson I learned is people who operate at that level of creativity are able to do that because they outsource every little aspect of their life. So, for example, Dermot has a manager, he has a social media videographer, he has a logistics person. Like he has all these people who do a lot of work for him so he can just focus on being himself and focus on being creative. And that is what I found is most appealing and most interesting that I didn't know, like I didn't realize, because, you know, you just see these people on stage performing or whatever, but in the background, they're outsourcing like everything so that they can just be themselves and be creative. And I think that would be like an incredible place to get to in your life if you could just focus on being, you know, what you want to be. And I think that's the coolest thing I kind of witnessed in all that. And there were so many different learning like opportunities and little learning things, like just listening to them talk, just listening. So like I would be here and they would be doing the rehearsal. Gabe was sitting on a couch and then Dermot at the piano, and just like hearing them talk, you just learn little things. Like, so for example, like in passing, Dermot said something like he was going to do an album that was just piano, but all his managers told him not to. And then Louis Capaldi did an album because his managers told him it wouldn't be successful, but then Louis Capaldi did an album that was just piano and it was very successful. And so Dermot said, and that's when I found out that no one really knows what will or will not be successful, so you got to listen to yourself. Like little things like that you can just kind of pick up, like little things in passing that you just kind of learn, and how they present themselves and how they carry themselves and how like humble they are and how human they are. You look at like different people who are very successful and they kind of have this persona, but like in the background, they're just like very good, genuine, you know, human individuals.
When you sit in the corner with a room like that, with the legends on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
are you insecure and overwhelmed?
No, it's interesting because I thought I would be, but I really wasn't. They really created an environment where like, hey, we're all just creative people who want to do something, and that's awesome. And so there's no, you know, creative hierarchy. Creativity isn't subject only to famous people, and it's not subject to only successful people. There are very creative people who will never be discovered who are just as amazing and incredible as people like Dermot or as people like Gabe. And so I never felt that kind of superiority complex. I wouldn't say I was intimidated. I'd say I was more honored, if that makes sense. I was more I felt more privileged than I did intimidated.
So among the people who are successful and creative, there are a set of people who accepts and be grateful for the luck factor they had, which differentiated them from the guys who were equally creative but were not discovered.
Yes. Yes, I would say yeah, yeah. And you could definitely feel that. And also not necessarily equally creative and not discovered. Sometimes it's like equally creative, but their creative medium isn't as popular. So for example, like if you're super creative and talented in music, there's obviously a larger demographic who will, be into that as opposed to someone who's super creative in like metal sculpting or pottery or something like that. So creativity across the board is non-discriminatory and equally available, but the consumers are of your creativity are more discriminatory and less available, if that makes sense.
What's trending at a given time could be different.
Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's what you're
Yeah.
getting at.
Yeah. So the best musical artist in the world will always be more famous than the best poet in the world, just because more people like music.
During this time,
Yeah.
100 years from now, if poetry or sculpture becomes the trend,
Yeah.
then that becomes more,
Exactly. Yeah.
and the musicians take a backseat.
And I find that creative mediums that combined each other end up being more popular, if that makes sense. So film will always be more popular because it mixes the creativity and the art of lighting, cinematography, script writing, acting. Like there's in any given movie, there's like 100 different creative aspects put together. So it's much more marketable and it's much more enjoyable than, just the single creative aspect of pottery or poetry, if that makes sense. So same with music, like the art of mixing, the art of lyrics, the art of performance, the art of singing, like all of those things kind of come together to create a very catchy song that's always going to be more popular than just like the art of, a singled out. So for example, I would say, poetry and songwriting are very similar because poetry is just the lyrics without the music. And the reason songwriting is so much more popular is because it adds a whole new dimension to it. And so it's more marketable and it's more enjoyable and it's more complex. And I think there's just a bigger market for that. So I would say it's not a matter of creatives being less discovered or more discovered. I think a lot of it has to do with the market that's available to them.
And the way you align yourself with a lot of things.
Yes, 100%.
So, few hundred years ago, Shakespeare's drama would be the talk of the town.
Yes, correct.
The people who are in it would be the most famous people, right? 300 years later or 400 years later, now it's movies,
Yes,
music.
correct.
How do you look at that, and where do you think it's going to go?
It's so
Being a
interesting.
creator? Yeah.
It's very much unpredictable. I think the greatest art form of the future, like the most popular art form of the future, hasn't been invented yet. And so I don't, there's no way to, I think within that there's this cool concept of, like you mentioned, Shakespeare was like the talk of the town, a couple hundred years ago. But today there are people who are as, not creative, but as, I'd say creative as Shakespeare in that field, but will never reach that level of fandom because the market for live plays and Broadway is so much lower and the competition is so much higher that, there's just not the same market for it. So I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting how like an artist like Ed Sheeran today, you could have you could place him 100 years ago and he would be a nobody because that's just not the music that was around. And so I think it's so interesting how creatives adapt and kind of create the current and modern culture that we have in the art field. I think that's interesting in that concept. But to answer your question, there's no way of really predicting what that looks like in 20, 50, 100 years.
When you compare your creativity, your creative art form, parallelly to another creative art form, such as a painting, paintings can be materialized, and it can be given as a physical product, which can be tangible. Do you see poetry having the limitation of just being in an audible form or just words? Someone has to read it.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
Someone has to listen to it, as opposed to just, yeah.
I would say it's kind of apples and oranges. It's difficult to compare the two, and so I think it's safe, it's best not to. But I think there's a certain amount of liberty in that because yes, the poetry has to be written and performed, but there's 100 different ways to perform it, and there's 100 different ways to present it. You could present poetry painted within a painting, or you could present poetry in theater or in movie or in song. So I think it has its limitations, but with that, it also equally has its opportunities. So, for example, the way I perform my poetry is a little more theatrical, a little more expression, as opposed to someone just straight reading it or someone, acting it out, or like, so there's many different spins you can take on it, and it's very liberating in that degree because it's not bound to a specific canvas or a tangible, object.
The more senses an artist caters to, the better it resonates, the more entertaining it becomes.
Wait, say that one more time.
So, we have senses, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Listening,
yes.
seeing,
The more,
feeling, and the more sensors
that we connect with.
There's a chance of it being more engaging and entertaining.
100%.
Right? But at the same time, we have also reached a point where we cater to almost all the senses, right?
Break that down. I'm interested.
For something like a small YouTube video, right? Or shorts. You cater to seeing, you cater to listening, you cater to maybe not feeling, but like, listening, hearing, and listening, hearing, and seeing. And a small video can actually put you through different emotions, right? It can put you through anxiety, it can put you through laughter, it can put you to, sadness. A single video can do multiple feelings, and one video can do one, right? So it's almost like getting to a point where it kind of saturates. Okay, so you've explored all the senses. Now you have explored all the emotions. What else can be done?
Oh, okay. Yes, I kind of get what you're saying there. Kind of like you feel like there's almost like we've hit like a limitation, like we've done it all kind of thing.
Yeah, where else could it go?
Yeah, no, it is interesting because it's such a good question, but I think it.
Or I guess VR puts you in another perspective.
Different
realm too, right?
Yeah. And while we've, like you said, kind of tapped into different art forms that kind of reach each one of those senses, it's not like a black and white, like we've done it all. It's like, it's more or less there's multiple answers to it in the sense that there's different ways we can still connect to those senses, if that makes sense. So for example, you'll never come up with, if you line up, numbers 1 through 9, that's all the numbers between 1 and 9. But there's a million combinations that you can arrange those. So yes, we've reached that limit of, we're connecting with all the senses and all the different emotions to certain degrees, but there's so many different ways that we can manipulate that and develop within that, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So within the limited constraints we have, there's still room to grow and room to come up with
100%.
unique, creative things.
100%. There's no such thing as too much creativity and too much creation.
Yeah. Do you like the idea of Renaissance period?
100%. It's beautiful. Like the whole, like that's when we really got to a point in life where we could enjoy art, because kind of prior to that, so much of life was just kind of survival, that there was no space for art. And so I would not be where I am unless, that kind of took place. So I'm very grateful for that. And the amount of talent that came out of that, and the amount of development that came out of that, and technique for any art form, specifically with painting, I've noticed, is just like phenomenal. And I'm a huge fan of that.
Would you like to see that happening all around the world?
How do you mean? That like enjoyment for that time period, or?
I mean, the whole world getting to a point where artificial intelligence takes care of all the repeated mundane stuff. So almost all the human beings are then setting their eyes onto creative tasks for them to explore.
Yes. Okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. This is a very interesting one that I've tossed back and forth, like, because as AI comes more prevalent, like how does that test the art field? Because now AI can create art. So is that real art? Like AI can create a #1 hit, or AI can create, pretty soon we'll have streaming services where you just type in what movie you want to watch and then we'll create it for you. Like that's the future. That's the next 20 years, if not sooner. And so there's two sides of that coin. Part of me is like, I'm not super wanting it to develop to that point because it kind of takes away kind of the human experience of art. But with that being said, I am looking forward to a time where AI takes care of all accounting, takes care of all, all these different aspects of life, so we can focus more on being creative. And I would be interested in that. But with that comes the AI also creating art. So I don't know. I'm tossed between the two.
So ideally, you would like artificial intelligence to be at its peak, so it can do all the repeated mundane tasks,
Yes.
being a
And
factory
humans can
worker,
just focus on being creative.
create roads and things like that. But you don't want the AGI, artificial general intelligence, to be at a point where
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I agree. And even with that first one, it's very interesting because I'm most creative after I'm productive. Like after I do something productive, I don't know, my mind kind of creates space to be creative. And so I think the two kind of go hand in hand. Like creativity is an escape from the mundane productivity, and you kind of need both to an extent, right? Like if you spend your whole
Absolutely.
life just being creative, and you're not going to feel fulfilled as if you balance the two. So I think you kind of need to. So much of my like favorite poems come from when I'm at work and I'm working and I'm being productive, and I get like a line and then I go home and I develop that. Whereas on days where I'm off, where I just have the whole day to be quote unquote creative, I end up procrastinating a lot of it. So I think you really need the two to work hand in hand. So complete takeover of all productivity, I think, is unhealthy. But for some of the more mundane things, yes.
So productivity is what winds you up, and creativity releases.
I think productivity creates a sense of success, and when I feel like I've accomplished something, creativity has more room to breathe, if that makes sense. In the sense that where it's I don't know, it's very difficult for me even to articulate how I feel about it. But when I'm productive and I go to the gym and I run and I work, make some money, I feel like I'm accomplished, and so the pressure to produce something creative is less tangible, and the removal of that pressure creates a better environment for creativity. How about that?
It's a
If that
different
makes
framework.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at even articulating it completely, but
Yeah.
that's the best I can do for you.
No, but I think there's a difference in the way you explained it and the way I understood.
Okay.
So if I were to visualize and articulate what I said in a material format, I was looking at those old dolls. You can wind them,
Yeah.
and then it just goes right. It just jumps around. My whole idea was productivity winds you up, and then you release all that pressure
Oh, okay. Yes.
through
Yes.
creativity. Yours
Yes.
were,
Okay. Yeah. That too. That also plays into it 100%.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
and the way you explained it is productivity gives you the freedom to be
Creative.
human,
Yeah.
and then you create.
Yes. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
That's a very good summary.
Yeah. So that's just it happens hand in hand, but like it's just in a reverse role, right? When I was talking about Renaissance period, do you see the possibility of the world being in a place where, forget about all the negative things people say about AI, forget about all the conspiracy theories, forget about the actual movie about how the Terminator or this thing's actually starting to act against human. Let's forget about all that. Let's think completely optimistic. AI actually doing all the things that we are bored to do, and it gets to a point where you get to do the cool stuff, and there's a universal income if if you're not like doing anything, but at the same time you also get rewarded to come up with new and exciting thing which pushes the civilization to the next level, right? Do you see a possibility? We're similar age, right? We're a few years apart, but still similar
correct.
age, right? In our 20s. You're just about to start. Me, I'm on the other end.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But do you see a possibility of world as a whole getting to a point where they say these wars are stupid, fights are stupid? Let's bring humanity together and just focus on things like this. Let's come up with the next next cool stuff, next cool technology, whether that's traveling to Mars or finding a solution for world hunger. Do you see a possibility of that happening in the next within our lifetime.
It's okay, so it's interesting, and it's difficult to predict one way or the other. I will say this: so on that topic of AI kind of coming in and taking, certain aspects that AI is good at, I think over the next few years there's going to be a huge shift in our value system for education and our value system for career, if that makes sense. So, for example, today a bachelor's of arts is not as valuable as a bachelor's of commerce. So today, financially, a bachelor's of arts, if you have a bachelor's of arts, you're less marketable. You're not going to make as much as opposed to if you get a bachelor's of commerce. I think in 10 years that's going to switch, because I think a lot of what you do with a bachelor's of commerce will be taken over by AI, and your bachelor's of arts is going to be more valuable. So I think there's going to be a huge shift in what we see as valuable for education and for career path as that kind of comes in and changes so much of like the day-to-day life. Now, as far as accomplishing a state of like global peace where we all kind of wake up one day and like, hey, let's just start being creative, we'll let the AI handle all this and we'll, solve all these problems. I think across the board, it would be pretty difficult to accomplish that. But I won't say one way or the other. How about that?
It's very interesting what you said first, Bachelor of Arts versus Bachelor of Commerce, right? When it comes to arts, there's this huge misconception that creative people just are creative and they come up with creative and it just happens, right? But there are some technicalities behind a creative art form too. There's a process to it. You are creative, but for you to create, for instance, if we were to use the example of the poem that you created about the men lying in the grave beside your home, it didn't happen just like that. You got a line and then you expanded it as much as you could, so stories on both sides, and then you compressed it and then you gave it more flavor with the rhyming, with the beautiful words, and then you put that into a form which can be shared under a minute in a social media platform. And now you have a beautiful art. And like you said, when Bachelor of Arts is not predominant, a lot of creative people don't understand the technical skills required for them to manufacture an art or create an art.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree.
Right? And when people seek or go after things that are marketable, they might also be putting their own gifts in the back seat just to get something marketable, and tying themselves with other people who might have gifts. So there might be one guy who's super good with math. There's another guy who is supposed to be the world's biggest poet, but now he signs up for the commerce course just because it's more marketable.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
No, that's very interesting.
And then this person never explores the other side. They don't understand, how they might give it a shot, but then without understanding the technicalities, they give up. But that knowledge of, this is how it works. Okay, this is my gift, but how to tap into that gift and if we were to talk about Michelangelo, how to kind of take out the rocks that's not, or scrape the rocks not needed for the rock to achieve its legend and be the sculpture it was always meant to be. You need to learn how to, take off those pieces. Yes. But they don't understand that. So it's interesting, whatever you said. So there's more people, it becomes marketable, so it means more people will come into it, more people will explore it, more people will have the technical knowledge of how to manufacture an art. And if they are naturally gifted, they're going to possibly see a brighter future for themselves. And
yes. 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
But overall, do you feel optimism or you feel not so optimistic about everything that's happening and everything that's coming?
Very optimistic. I think.
What are some of the factors?
Okay, some of it might be blind optimism, but I don't know. I feel like there's no use in worrying over certain things you can't control. So where art and where poetry are going to be in 5 years, or where Instagram or social media, quote unquote, influencers are going to be in 2-5 years, is something I can't really control. I can just kind of operate in the current circumstance and the current environment in which it is and kind of do my best in that. So kind of worrying about where, the creative culture is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years with AI or with the global circumstance or with a possible recession or with this or with that is just kind of more or less a waste of time. And so just defaulting to optimism will put you in a position to be more successful in the current state that it's in, right? Because I spend my whole day worrying about tomorrow. I forget that I have today. And so I would say a lot of it is kind of forced blind optimism, if I'm being like completely honest. But with that being said, I think I've tasted a little bit of success, and that also creates a culture of optimism and kind of a mindset of what's possible and what's out there. And I've seen in certain windows that I'm very lucky to see into, and the drive to go further and go to the next window, the next, also kind of creates an optimistic mindset. So I would say those are the reasons behind my optimism, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, lack of knowledge about future stems anxiety,
Yes, correct.
right? And if you did know what's going to happen in the future, that gives you a sense of calm.
Correct.
Because if you look at the past, you've seen people who are called smart because they were visionaries, they made some right steps, and they were aligned on the right side. You don't hear a lot of stories about the people who made the wrong steps because they never
They never become,
anything, right? Now, as humans, we constantly try to be those people who are going to be called smart after a lot of years. Now, like you said, something like music, there's no way to predict where it's going to be, what's going to happen, right? Maybe if you operate on a higher scale and there's so many followers for you, you can probably judge the emotions of the people and where it's leaning towards to a certain limit.
Yes.
But on a smaller scale, for a lot of us, you don't really have that data, and
Correct.
you don't really understand where the wave is swinging. You're just a small fish in a big sea, so to speak, right? So if you were to look at it from a different angle, right? Is there a way is there an internal mindset that you can possess that takes away the concern of what's going to happen in the future?
Okay. Now this is interesting because this is something I'm still trying to work on myself and trying to find that peace in like complete uncertainty. And so I don't have a direct answer for you, but recently I kind of had this mindset of if it's meant to happen, it will happen. And anything outside of your control, there's no use worrying in. So much like before when I would post a video, I was so like, oh, it needs to get a certain amount of views or else it's a failure, or, what if it doesn't reach? But now I'm just kind of like, I just control what I control, and just like, if it's supposed to happen, if it's supposed to get a certain amount of views, if it's supposed to, then it will happen. And that is a very calming and relieving mindset to operate under. And it kind of takes away a lot of the anxiety towards the uncertainty. Like the uncertainty is always going to be there. It's just your attitude towards it that you can affect.
Interesting. So for you, you're just looking at the task at hand at a given time.
Yes.
And exploring it to the fullest. When that's over, you're just going to look at 2 feet ahead of you.
Yes, correct.
Tap onto the next task, put a check mark. And if it's wrong, it's wrong.
Yes, 100%.
If it's right, it's right.
Yeah, 100%. I think so much of, even doubling back on like kind of existing outside the school system, so many people I notice in the school system treat everything like a pass or fail, like a yes or no, like a black or white, because you spend 12 years, and if you go post-secondary, another, total of 16 years in operating as everything's a test and everything's either right or wrong. And so you're more reserved and you're more afraid of like the no answer, where I don't know, I feel like I kind of grew up in a culture of there is not everything's a test. Like not everything you have to get right. Like the first step of success is failing. And so just realizing that. And so when you experience your first time failing at something or not being successful at something, you kind of have a whole different mindset of, okay, this is just a learning experience. And like, where do I take it from here?
Fascinating. Yeah. And is that a constant step? You kind of have to come back to it? Do you go off on like all those things that are overwhelming and then you just come back?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there things that
I don't
you
know.
use?
I feel like how I work as a person is like my anxiety or my stress will kind of build up, and then climax, and then just like I'll be like, you know what, like whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. There's nothing I can do about it. And then that is just like the most enjoyable week or 2 weeks, and then it will start to build up again. That's kind of how I operate.
What do you do in those 2 weeks?
And so right
you're
after
riled up. You get to this point, you get to the pinnacle where you're like so stressed out, so anxious, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna take a break.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take a deep breath and just get out of everything that I'm involved in. Or so what does that look like for you?
So I would say, just kind of getting back to what I enjoy originally, and this experience is compartmentalized into the different categories of my life. So it's not like it's not like everything in my life is anxious and stressful, and then there's a breaking point, and then everything is fine for 2 weeks. It's kind of like my poetry and social media presence is bothering me at this time, whereas my physical health is bothering me at this time. Like they're not all synced. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
And like my financial stress is bothering me at this time. So there's always something I'm battling. But I get to a point where I'm like, okay, whatever happens online with my social media presence. I'm not going to worry about it. But I'll still have like this stressor going on. Does that kind of make sense? Like they overlap. Like it's not like a 2 days or 2 weeks or whatever of like complete zen. Like I'll always have something kind of bothering me.
Yeah.
But so with each of those different compartmentalized areas of my life, when I have like this kind of breaking point with my social media presence or whatever, that's when I experience like the most kind of enjoyment in it. And when I have this kind of breaking point with, my physical health, that's when I have the most enjoyment with, being healthy and, running and going to the gym. And same with like every different aspect.
In your perspective, if money was not a problem, do you think a lot of this would go away?
So the idea kind of, you're touching on the idea like, more money, more problems, or more money, less problems, kind of is what, if I'm understanding.
If you have the money, it gives you the freedom to do.
Yes.
Okay. Money stress is one of the factors. Money stress could be a common denominator. So if you have like 10 items that you battle constantly, I mean, not at the same time, parallelly, money could be a common denominator for 6 out of those 10 things.
Oh, 100%, 100%,
Right?
100%. I think, 100%. I think money, so people ask, like, does money buy happiness? I think money buys freedom, and freedom is a direct contributor to happiness. So I think if you took away, like, any financial stress I would ever have, it would free up a lot. But I think the idea of more money, no problems, obviously not. I think more money, different problems. I think it would, I would like to say it would free up a lot of things in my life, but at the same time, I wouldn't know until I got there, right? Like I said, like the goals at the top of the mountain are going to change on your way up.
What's an ideal human life for you as far as you're concerned?
Ooh, okay. I would say getting to a state where I have where I'm living and operating on par with what I would define as success, if that makes sense. And so what that kind of means, I know that's kind of very cliche, but what that kind of means is, so my definition of success broken down into like the different areas of my life is operating to the highest degree of what you're capable as a person. So for example, LeBron James is a very successful basketball player, right? His definition of success is playing in the NBA, scoring all the points that he does. Now for you to be a successful basketball player, physically, and I'm not saying you are or you aren't, but physically you're probably not capable of what LeBron did. Like you have a ceiling, and your ceiling is different than LeBron. That's just life. But you're better at other things, et cetera, et cetera. And so your definition of success in basketball might just be playing at like a house league or something like that. And so I feel like people kind of have like this, not a ceiling for their lives in different areas, but kind of like this highest level, right? I'll never play in the NFL. So for me being a successful football player, it might be just going to the park and playing with my friends. And I'm butchering my explanation of this, but I would say I want to get to a point where I operate in like the main areas of my life to the best that I could operate in.
What are some of those main areas for you?
Finances, physical health, creativity, spiritual health, and family.
Out of these on these 5 things, what are some of the destinations you would like to get to?
Okay. I would love to, it's so tricky because I kind of want to keep this concept of like I just want to go and see. Like I
It's
don't
gonna
have a
change.
specific. Yeah, yeah,
It's
exactly,
possibly gonna
exactly.
change,
But I
right?
would love
But at
like
this point, it's
the
ready.
idea
Yeah.
of like a very so we'll break down financial. I would love like a very. I don't necessarily want to be super rich, but like comfortable. You know, I don't want money to be an issue. I want to be able to travel and to be able to do what I want and not have to focus on that as much. I would say that is my definition of success for that. Family at some point, not anytime soon. I would love to have a not necessarily a traditional family, but a family. And so that would kind of be my definition of success for that. Creativity,
So sorry, what's the difference between traditional and?
kind of. Well, okay, yeah, yeah, I guess I would want a traditional family. I kind of, in my mind, like traditional family, you just think like the nuclear family, 2 kids,
Oh,
and
okay,
wife and mom.
all right.
Like that's, I feel like is kind of overplayed. I don't know what my family, what I'd want it to look like. Obviously, like a monogamous relationship with someone, like long term, but like what that necessarily looks like, I haven't officially kind of had time to really look into because I'm still kind of pretty young. But so yeah, not necessarily. I just want to avoid like that cliche of like there's so many friends I have who are like I want this many kids and that's it. That's the end all be all. And or I want, to live with or like I want my parents to live in a home and not with I don't know. People have so many different compartmentalized ideas of what a good family is. I don't want to set those boundaries, so that's why I kind of said that. But and so that's kind of my definition of success for family. What were the other ones? Financial, family, spiritual health. I'm a Christian, and so I really believe that there's a higher power out there, and getting close to that and kind of experiencing what He has for me, and operating in that level with a God is something that I find as that I would determine is my like spiritual success level. And then creativity. I don't know what that looks like successfully. Like I don't know. I don't really have a clear definition of what that looks like because I don't know what I'm capable of and how far I can take it. But definitely, I'm going to write a book. So that's what I would say for that. And then health wise, again, there's no like clear like definition of success for that. But I have a few like little goals that I'm kind of working on. And so when I reach all of those levels and all of those areas of success, that's kind of what I find to be my ideal life.
Do you seek validation for this from your parents in a way? How what role do they play in this at this stage in your life? Are you completely detached?
No, 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 definitely not. I would say they're definitely my biggest support group or kind of like my stable, like, so my parents, one of the best things they did for obviously they stayed together, which is huge, huge. And I always had that stability. And so going into my adulthood, there's so many things I didn't have to question that so many other kids and so many other of my friends had to question. I didn't have to enter, my adulthood wondering, if my parents really loved me, or I didn't have to go in wondering, if I was a reason they split up, or I didn't have to go into my adulthood wondering, different things like what gender I was or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, or not that there's anything wrong with those, personal battles, but I was given an advantage by not having to worry about those because of this solid foundation and upbringing and personal development that my parents invested into me. There's so many areas of my life that weren't shaky. And there are so many people who don't have that and who are still successful. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm saying in my experience, I'm very grateful I had that. And that's probably the biggest role that they've played into where I am now and where I'm trying to go.
Would you homeschool your kids?
Okay. So I don't know what education is going to look like by the time I have kids. I feel like we're kind of moving away from a super traditional school experience, especially with like the integration of artificial intelligence. But if I had kids today, yes, 100%. At least maybe not for high school. Maybe I don't know yet, but definitely for those first early years, there's no reason that a 6-year-old kid should be sat in a classroom for 6 hours a day and be told what to do. I think so much of the reason I have so much creative liberty is because when I was 6 years old, I didn't even have to do school. Like when I probably didn't even sit down and do school till probably I was the age of like grade 4, grade 5. Like before that, I was just every day it was just like a play day, and I'm so grateful for that. And so many people are afraid, oh, what if you end up being behind? That's not how it works, right? Like that's not how human development works, right? I think when you're young, you should be like just set free to like not be yourself, but kind of learn by yourself, learn by experiencing human interaction, by playing, by finding interest in reading, like things like that. Instead of being told you have to do this, my experience was, oh, there's stories in these books. How do I get into these stories? Oh, I have to learn reading. And so it was kind of more of an interest and less of a task. And so I think that is something I would want my kids to experience, as opposed to just being told you have to learn how to read, you have to learn how to do math. I want them to find that value in it, so that they actually value their education and go through their education system, just kind of spearheading what they want and what they're interested in.
When the podcast is over, you drive to your home. If Christ appeared in front of you and said, Joshua, I'm going to task you with a task for the rest of your life. I want you to come up with the best education system
Okay.
for kids up to age 20.
Okay.
What would that look like?
Okay. So it's very interesting. Okay. And I want to reiterate, I'm by no means an expert. I am just a product of a system that I found successful. And so I very much preach on that and speak towards that, the homeschool experience. So, and with that being said, I have nothing against the public school system. I just found a lot of success outside of it. And so I'm very much an advocate for that. And also keep in mind, I'm also very young. So a lot of what I say is just from personal experience, and I'm by no means an expert. But if I was tasked with creating a educational system, I would very much be a fan of the idea of, like I said, letting kids discover education on their own and finding their own interest in it, and then developing that at their own rate and at their own speed. So for example, in the school system, everybody gets the same treatment. Like, so if you're in grade 2, you have to learn this, and this to get onto grade 3. But in my experience, when I was in grade 2, I was a little more advanced on these. So I was learning, I kind of really started in kind of grade 4, grade 5. So when I entered there, my math skills were kind of at, let's say, grade 8, whereas my reading skills were kind of at grade 6. Whereas, I was able to develop those skills outside of the timeline of what everyone else was doing. And because of that, not only was it not discouraging and I didn't get, frustrated as much, but I was also able to enjoy it. Right. Whereas everyone in grade 2 is given the same pill, like the same, like imagine like your doctor prescribed, everyone the same medicine for a certain, sorry, if your doctor prescribed the same medicine for a group of 30 people, that would be a disaster. Right. So I would love to see an education system where people are allowed to develop at their own speeds, and maybe even, crazy idea, stay outside of like structured education until grade 4, grade 5, and just kind of let kids be kids. It's so depressing, like I said, the concept of, from the time you're born, you're going to spend 12 years of your life 6 hours a day in a building just being told what to do and being judged by a percentage on a piece of paper. And not to mention that, I don't know if you've seen any schools here in London, but the architecture is absolutely oppressive. Like, I remember some classes I had in high school where it's like in a basement with like no natural lighting, and I'm like, holy cow, that like the difference between this and prison is like a teacher. And so I that's what I would say. That's what I would really enjoy that. And like I said, by no means am I an expert on education or the educational process. I just know from my own experience what worked and what I'm grateful for, and I would love others to be able to experience that as well.
Now, when you get to a point, right, towards the end of your life, a few things, okay? So let me structure it like this.
Okay.
If you get to a point, first of all, what do you want your legacy to be? As in, do you have a strong sense of, I want to be remembered, I want to be somebody?
100%. Yeah. No, 100%. That's a big driver for me. I don't know, the idea of building something bigger than yourself is something I've always gravitated towards. And I don't know if that's like in the financial district, or if that's in the creative arts district, or that's even in, my creating like a family, like a solid family. I don't know what that looks like, but definitely that's always been a big driver.
Got it. So everything you've done shouldn't be wrapped up by end of your life.
Say again, sorry?
Everything you've done, or your life shouldn't be wrapped up at the end of your life in this planet.
Yes, yeah.
It
In
has
theory,
to go
yeah,
on.
I would love for that. Yeah. I would. Now I have no control over that, but
So your whole life journey is sort of a seed for something much bigger.
That's one way
ideally.
of looking at it. Yeah. 100%.
If you end up getting all the money in the world, or money was not a constraint, would you tie yourself into a mission at some point, and some sort of mission? It could be ending world poverty or something that you're passionate about. It could change too.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I would definitely wouldn't be surprised. I think that's kind of what happens to a lot of
But
people.
at this point, when you're 20, you get that opportunity. What mission would you tie yourself into?
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's an interesting thought. I don't really think I don't think I've really given that
I thought.
enough thought. I always kind of had this idea. I would love to, at some point, I kind of had this idea of a project of like displaying how. So I think living in Western culture, we're very spoiled, and I think a lot of times we don't see how spoiled we are just by growing up in Canada or America. Like the poverty line in Canada compared to like the poverty line in the Middle East or the poverty line in Africa or Asia.
India, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a drastic difference that we can't even comprehend how lucky we are. So I've always kind of had this idea of doing a project where like I go to like the poverty in these different countries and capture that in a photo album and then combine that with poetry. That's something I would love to do. I think I'm more the type of person to bring more awareness and reality to desperate situations than to actually jump in and necessarily be hands-on. Not that I would be against that, but I think I'm more gifted at raising a community to solve a problem than actually being a member, like specifically following someone else in that community. If that kind of makes sense. And I'd honestly have to give that question a little more thought to give you a direct answer. But that's what I would.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You'd like to travel around the world and sort of put a scale to it all through your creative art, so to speak.
Yes.
Which would then become a catalyst or inspiration.
Yes.
For a moment, if you call it that, and leading on to something positive at the end of it. And you think you're gifted for the first part of it, creating awareness, right?
Yes.
That's is that what you mean?
Yes, 100%.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a wrap.
Yeah.
Did you have a good time?
Oh, I had a great time. I always love talking. And you're a great host, so I definitely appreciate the conversation. And at some point, we'll have to have a conversation about you because I'm sure your audience would love to hear your story as a very successful man moving to a whole new country and building a life for yourself.
Thank you, Josh.
No, yeah, that's definitely something we'll have to touch on.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
But I had a wonderful time, man.
Mutual.
You're
Very
fascinating. Some of the things you do is remarkable. Some of the clarity you have at your age is not common. I hope you're able to take advantage of it. I hope you're able to grow at this rate with, no point in time doubting your ability to do the things that you want to do. And you really create something wonderful out of yourself because A, you have the gift, you have the natural potential, B, you have the awareness, and the combination of both is not a common thing, and you have that. So I'll be so happy to see you successful, and I'm really grateful that I had an opportunity to sit down with you and have a conversation.
I appreciate it. Mutual, very mutual.
All right, brother.
Okie dokie.